Huh? 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 All right, cool. We're here. How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the show. How are you? How are you, Bernie? How's it
We
going?
are finally live. Doing pretty good. Love your stellar intros. I'm gonna need me my own AI music intro one of these days. But with
It's just gonna
chat
be like Bernie, 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 Bernie. It's gonna be the best, actually. I can think AI will do a good job.
or cartoon homunculus with Bert and Ernie, Sesame Street. Who knows?
I
Or
was just
Bill
thinking,
Nye.
yeah, can imagine them just walking, like marching, like Bert and Ernie riding mastodons. Like, be beautiful. But we have a show with a lot of people. Let's introduce some of our guests tonight. We have Liminal, we have Exotic Propulsion, we have Brittany, we have Simon. Adam's here from Space Case Zero, Aaron Corbett. What a crazy group. Isn't it amazing? I'm so glad you're here. How's it going, everybody?
It's going.
Well,
Alive and still kicking.
Another night and plenty of experiments.
Right, yeah. So, you might remember some of these people's voices. Exotic Propulsion, Jeremiah has done a number of experiments on the show. He maybe has something. Do you have something that you're supposed to?
I'm not planning on anything tonight because, as I mentioned in the pre-show,
I know. I just like to egg them
so
on.
many experiments that there is no space between the lab glass and the scales. And
he says that now, but if you keep pushing him, you never know.
But you never know. But Jeremiah will be helping us understand frequencies a bit, and we're going to be delving into the fields and the different types of frequency waves that you put into coils, as well as the electroculture. And we'll try out a little bit of the Z-App and the Rife technology coil here, and play with a couple magnets.
Something to do.
Yeah.
As well as Aaron, you're going to give us a brief rundown of some Russian energy healing technology, as well as your own coil.
Yeah, they've been at it since the 70s. At least, I mean, as far as using it professionally and openly goes.
Right, yeah, and there's so much potential because it's so powerful that you have to be careful that you don't use the wrong frequencies and energies and damage yourself with a lot of this stuff. It's
exactly.
Don't try at home sort of stuff. We were expecting Gerald, but sadly he was unable to make it, so hopefully we'll have him tomorrow. But I believe I had Gerald's video preloaded of his most recent one today, where he started planting some of his mung beans and explaining how he, here we go, is doing his electroculture setup experiments this year. While I get that ready, Andreas, do you mind maybe pulling up a tab and looking into the definition of electroculture a little bit and see what Wikipedia has, and then the dark side of the internet, aka the real side.
Yeah, well, let's see. Electroculture. If I type in wiki, I don't know if there's going to be a wiki for electroculture. There's a kook science. Come on. That's like as good as we're going to get. Kook science says that electroculture is a method of applying atmospheric electricity to the fertilization of a plant life. This may also be extended to include magnetism, magnetoculture, radio, light, chromopathy, and sound. The application of electroculture is intended to assist the agriculturalist to accelerate growth rates, increase yields, and improve crop quality, as well as protect plants from diseases, insects, and frost. That's some supplemental reading, though. Some of this actually be on Kook Science.
Sounds like some LRH plant measurement stuff. No?
Early reading on electroculture.
LRH isn't all bad.
Well, I just found this from 1892, though, so I was going to say it's interesting. Obviously, in the 19th century, they were already thinking that electricity was wild and interesting, and if it helps, sometimes after a lightning storm, there's a lot of greenery, right?
Yeah.
a tree gets hit and then a bunch of things sprout and probably made them wonder. So early readings on electroculture showed that there might actually be a benefit to this and that it could actually charge clouds. At this time, they were calling, what's the word for cloud studies? Kidney science. You know what I'm talking about? This is the thing. Back in the old days, cloud. There's a word for this. Back they used to call the study of clouds the study of kidneys.
Cloud seeding or cloud busting?
Cloud seeding.
The cloud busting back in the day.
Scientific study of kidneys. What's that called? Because that's the study of clouds. Originally, the study of kidneys was the study of clouds. There's a word for this.
Columnist type clouds?
Like pre-1800s, or when is this?
Right, in the 1800s. Cloud.
Okay.
I forget the name for this. This is horrible. Nephology. Is this it? I think I got there, right? Kidneys. There we go. Nephrology is the treatment of kidneys. Nephology is the treatment of clouds. And so there's some kind of a connection between the two terms. I forget what it is exactly, but the idea that you're looking at the, you know, the processing, the metabolism of the sky, of the precipitation through the clouds. So they connected the two ideas, and they talked about the health of the ecosystem through the health of the clouds, because their kinds of vapors were sort of like, what's the term again? You know, the bodily humors, right? So there's kind of the ecological humors. And yeah, then they eventually decided this was not the most scientific way to study clouds, but all of our terms for clouds today come from these nephologists. 1802, I think Luke Howard creates the terms for stratiform, cumuliform, stratocumuliform, cumulonimbifform, and cirriform, which, you know, up to this point, you'd think, hey, we've seen clouds for thousands of years, probably, right? I mean, how new can a cloud be? And these terms are only invented in the 1800s. So what does that tell you about
reproducing some of these clouds?
What does that say about the physics of clouds? Does it mean that clouds have always been did they change? Why would we need new science? I think this is important.
Well, because we're trying to do something new in science, we need new science to explain exactly.
One at a time, gentlemen.
Sorry, Jeremiah, please begin. Your thought on
it. Sorry, didn't mean to get disrupt there. The study of clouds needs to be updated, because we are trying to do new things in science that we haven't done before. You know, studying weather patterns and studying nature is ultimately the way that any of our major advancements were ever discovered. And so the study of clouds is now necessary because we're looking at electrogravitation, electric field forces, tapping the atmosphere. And some of this is a quite lost art. Obviously, everything I've just mentioned now all has existed in the past, and there's overwhelming evidence for, you know, previous cultures having flying craft that seemingly didn't have any kind of propulsion system that we would recognize today. And if you take a look at clouds and what keeps them in the air, it is absolutely not the conventional. It's not the Bernoulli types principles. It's absolutely not conventional air currents. It's not updrafts. It's not thermal heat. Freaking clouds could be completely frozen. Those are ice crystals up there. You can't tell me that it's floating there because
this is There's textbooks on this now, though, and it's mostly your Air Force engineers that get to learn how to work in these fields. But you can buy the actual books on the studies of geoengineering the sky, and when you look into that, it literally goes into like the electromagnetics, the science, how to seed clouds, different patterns they use. Elements that they use.
Highly recommend Disintegral's channel. If you watch Disintegral's videos on clouds, you'll be really impressed. Actually, he does a lot of different kinds of videos, but one of the studies of the consciousness of clouds idea, which, looking at some of the pictures of clouds, you have to wonder. I mean, this reminds me of Close Encounters with the Third Time. I expect it to just make some burn, like these.
Picture right here, I get very similar cloud formations in my electrolysis with the monoatomics, and it's led me to suspect that clouds indeed are in like more of a plasma monoatomic-ish.
You're right on with the plasma idea. Okay, so here's the thing, Bernie. The whole mention of plasma couldn't be more dead on. A plasma is effectively any medium filled with a variety of free charges. And so in clouds, we have a huge amount of positive ions coming down from the upper atmosphere, from the ionosphere, that are being continuously supplied by the sun. And they take all day and all night to finally make their way from the ionosphere down to Earth. During that entire transit, anything that happens to be in their way, they are positive ions, so they'll rip electrons straight out of water molecules, form unstable bonds, and they will leave those charged. And so they're able to provide electromotive transport, which is the way that clouds move, form, and create all these weird patterns. So if you see a weird pattern in a cloud, what you're really looking at there is an electric phenomena that's being caused by downwards ionic drift and ground charge. And you're looking at the electrodynamic difference between those two things and the interplay that they have on the condensation in the air. Because those little particles of water are, more conductive. They're going to grab on the charges, and they're much more dense. So they're going to experience more forces against each other, like that pattern right there. What you're looking at there is effectively an electromotive vortex that's being caused by the combination of both an updraft and a downwards drift that has taken into a magnetic flux, which any charged particles traveling through a magnetic field like that of Earth, in many cases, or a Birkeland current, will cause a rotation. So that's effectively what you're looking at right there. And you can tell with weird cloud formations what's going on electrically in that area. So they're just indicators. They show you really what the charges are doing.
And so once you study that, are you not then easily able to manipulate those things when you know the science?
Absolutely.
Because that's what they have collected.
Weather phenomena is not 100% natural anymore.
No,
it's not.
They have a lot of science on it. And so looking at those textbooks, they were above my understanding, but I want to send some of those to Jeremiah because I bought these.
Let's just make a quick reminder for anybody.
Ridiculous.
I just wanted to say, just in to supplement what Liminal just quickly purported was, hey, nature is not the only thing affecting weather anymore, which is a very general statement. But even if you don't think about HAARP, weather, if you just want to talk to your mom, if you just want to talk to your mom about this, I was going to say,
when a hurricane is coming straight at New York, and then it takes a sharp 90 degrees away from New York, that's not natural.
Well, again, you're using common sense, and I'm afraid it's less common. It's less common than people have anymore. So
yeah, it's absolutely true.
What if you wanted to hand a soundbite to an NPC, just hand them the CNBC article or Fox or CNN or whatever their designated mind control network is. Mexico cracks down on solar geoengineering, forcing startup to pause operations. This article you should send to anybody who doesn't know that geoengineering is happening, because there are nations and states that have forbid it, are involved in it. China, United States, Russia, for instance, France for their agriculture and wine and viniculture are constantly involved in geoengineering and spraying in order to produce clouds. But Mexico had recently banned it and stopped this company making sunsets. Right afterwards, where did making sunsets move to? Phoenix. What happened the last month? The blizzard in Arizona. Okay, I'm done.
Okay, well, there's also Scud. There's a ton of different ones in the United States that I could list. There's literally like 25 that I printed off in
Making sunsets is so good though for a title, because you know how they make sunsets? It's chemicals in the sky.
I wanted to elaborate about just the hurricane fighting thing, or the hurricane changing. There is a book on that from a military whistleblower that talks about his training in using electromagnetics to detour and shape and amplify and reduce the impacts of hurricanes.
How far back do you want to go? Our weather has been tempered with as early as the 40s or 50s, 1940s or 50s. So
yeah.
Since we're electrical beings, what's to say that we can't individually tamper with it?
Well, even back during the Roman Empire, people were complaining that all the wood smoke was changing the climate. And that was just from producing their garum and stuff, having to boil things.
Can anybody think of any of the earlier projects of geoengineering from the militaries in the 40s or 50s? Does anything come up in your mind?
I don't like getting into ufology, but I'm gonna say the Air Force being involved with Roswell and stuff like that in the late 1940s.
But I don't know if anybody remembers seeing these things. We've been hearing about cloud seeding, about weather control and all this stuff for quite some time. And it's been, articles will pop up and disappear. Videos will pop up and disappear. I've had the chance to take a look at a lot of different sites and companies. I've called several of them up to just verify these were actually like real, honest to goodness companies, because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. These websites would offer, and just as an example, one of the most recent ones that disappeared, the last one that I seen, you can go on there. You have to, it's a government only website. You have to, as like your city advisor or whatever, you know, agricultural commission, you could be a number of different representatives that they'll accept as your communication. But you get a hold of this company, and then some of the city's budget gets paid to have them come out and give you rain if you're in a drought, or change the weather for some, you know, agreed upon period of time. And there were several of these companies that I'm sure they're all still out there now, but they had publicly viewable sites and services that were available. And until they got their government contracts to basically go completely private and disappear, they were advertising publicly to let people kind of know that they existed. So
yeah, I printed all that stuff out, Jeremiah. I did the same thing, because I was like, so really, if you wanted to like prevent rain or have rain, you got to write a grant, or you got to write a letter or sign the paperwork to get a license too. It's really. And it was in the research and development stages for so long that they could just keep burying it in R&D forever and ever
until they get to the point where they
change their
put
company, and now they're in R&D still. And it's like, you're the same company. You've been doing this for 20 years. You're not still in research and development. It's developed, but
it's always going to be
researching and developing. Research is just looking where the Freemasons have been before.
It is.
But have you guys seen?
Nice.
Have you seen this one? I know Walt Disney Cold War weather control film from a Periscope, and I have this on my channel as well. But it's from 1959, which is not the beginning. We're looking past the 19th century. We're looking past Tunguska and Tesla. We're looking past World War II. We're looking past the aerosol injection of tin pins in the 30s and 40s. But let's skip ahead. This video is very interesting because it was a CIA classified or OSS classified film that was designed to say, what would we do if we had to control weather? Like, we had to control weather. If we didn't control the weather, there could be these sorts of hurricanes and storms that destroy Florida, right? Or maybe we want those storms to destroy someplace else instead of our own shores. I mean, literally, this is all in this film. And they say, how would we go about controlling the weather so we'd have better crops and less flooding, right, across America? How could we have a sustainable time? And they go with this cartoon, but eventually they get to, let me see if I can show you. Yes, aerosol injections. Where's the video? Yeah, so they use meteorologists to decide where to deliver cloud seeds. They then use nukes and blasting nukes and using aerosol injections, and then by guiding the explosion, they can guide the actual current of heat, which then delivers the storm in certain directions. And by delivering the storm in certain directions, they can guide it off the coast or towards specific locations away from the United States, towards islands, right? And this is all planned. This is exactly how the weather systems also are supposed to be regulated. Not just that they can manipulate them, but by doing this all the time, they can have regular weather. They can actually decide where storms and when storms should occur.
Right.
And
why would a hurricane hit a high value area like New York versus Louisiana?
Well, also remember when Louisiana was the most valuable place and the mafia was from there. So the choices have been made where will be valuable and which places cannot be valuable anymore. And how long that's for? Probably until they own those places, right? They've completely destroyed those places to buy it.
So you also have people that are probably heroes that are going out there and doing some SAI to block out the sun that has possibly prolonged. Yeah, it's increased Alzheimer and aluminum in the air and everything else. Yeah. But there are some studies and some groups that are using geoengineering that are good guys that can't even talk about what they're doing in their training, because not everybody's out here trying to destroy the earth with geoengineering. I guarantee. Yeah, there's so
they're
much
definitely
liability. It's like that one guy that spent his whole life trying to get lead regulated and removed because it was such a major neurotoxin on the population and the overall ecosystem.
Yeah, the amount of struggle that he had to go through to get that done.
It was his whole lifetime. And that was the guy that discovered carbon dating. He was sent on a wild goose chase that was expected to just waste a lot of his years. And he figured out the dating method. And then he went on this lifetime journey of battling evil scientists, lobbyists, to get rid of lead in our gasoline, our paints, everywhere, basically, because it was
Ever
such a
since
major
that
neurotoxin.
happened, the violent crime rates have slowly plunged year over
Oh
year.
yeah, after the year where the major reductions happened, there was definitely a significant dip in violent crimes in that year alone.
Crazy.
Imagine that, heavy metals shorting out one's brain. And this is exactly part of the problem with some of the geoengineering techniques, because there are different ways to seed clouds, and some of them were natural, and we've heard about like the wildest one, which I have yet to see completely verified, but it was enough for somebody to form a company around it. I do remember that. And they were also for hire. They had their own personal plane and would literally fly out with
check
that
this
rig
out.
on
Make
this
America
plane.
Green Again is all about it. They're all about stratospheric aerosol injections to stop global warming. See, this is the thing.
But,
A lot of
they
people
have
want to
they have
it.
different methods. Jeremiah, can you list some of those different methods? Because they're not they're
okay,
going
well, you
for
have
cheap.
aerosolization. Okay, so
cheaper.
aerosolization can cover a huge number of different mechanisms that help seed clouds. You initially need to give water crystals some place to start actually developing on, and so that will start it'll start redirecting sunlight prismatically and spread it out so that anything underneath one particular crystal will then receive less of the direct sun's rays, and that will allow that temperature to drop slightly, the thermal energy to be radiated, and then you'll have more condensation there. So once that process gets started, it doesn't take a lot of material. But one of the popular materials, which is unfortunately used way too often for cloud seeding, is aluminum oxide or just fine aluminum powders. And those types of metals are extremely toxic to crops, to people, to the respiratory system. So they cause all kinds of other problems down the line. And so basically you can use certain types of aerosols, but things that aren't naturally found in the human body, things like aluminum, which are known to be toxic and very terrible for the soil, that kind of stuff has to stop. And unfortunately, it's going to still be used quite often because it's highly effective and also extremely cheap.
And it's not as bad as lead.
Nobody is going to harvest seeds without thinking. I don't think that would work anyways.
I'm not saying it's great.
Use a laser from
I want to also emphasize that America isn't the only country in the world that has the power to manipulate weather. So there's a larger global game going on of weather interaction.
You can follow the weather and bet on it. Profit.
Geoengineeringwatch.org. Dan Wigington.
Oh, Dan Wigington, though he's intense. He is. I used to watch Dane back in 2017 when I was teaching and just noticing all this was going on. But Jeremiah, I have to thank you for talking about this from the scientific standpoint, because it's really hard to get people that know about science to accept this, and the way that you understand it helps explain it to everyone. So that's awesome.
What about using broad lasers on CubeSat loons, so that you've got these balloon satellites that everyone's all worried about now, and these systems could be used to shoot broad laser and actually affect heat in ranges of maybe a kilometer, right? So you could maybe produce in certain zones a heat lift using a laser, and this could guide weather patterns as well. Does that make sense?
That's
smart. I would tell you there's almost zero chance you're ever going to be able to focus a laser in any.
That sounds like next level weather balloon.
They have also those black. It's like the black line, and I don't think it's a chemical. It looks like some type of light that they can lay out before they do some of the seeding. I don't know if Jeremiah knows what that is.
MAGA here, Make America Green Again's got some interesting stuff. Total, the eruption injected 20 million tons of sulfur dioxide aerosols into the stratosphere. The USGS said the Earth's lower atmosphere temperature dropped by approximately 1 degree. So this is kind of an interesting point when we talk about this. We also forget about volcanoes.
Oh, you're talking about climate change?
Climate change and weather.
They recalled the data on climate change the last 40 years because they haven't been taking into consideration post-eruptive data and what happens after an eruption on any of the different provinces, the different sites that are highly active.
Absolutely.
They've taken that data into account. They take eruption, that they have a certain time period. And so they're not even monitoring the volcano after eruption date, but what happens to the land after when it's heated and still heating and through the cooling process, that is an enormous amount of methane, sulfur, tons of things that
we're talking about massive air pollution. This has been a problem for people that live on, for say, the Hawaiian Islands. they're allowed to go back into their neighborhoods when the air pollution is way off the charts and they're not supposed to be living there. And then it takes a number of years for the enough people to get sick to recognize that the local, administrative government really fucked up.
Well,
Pardon my language.
No, that report was supposed to come out in 2020, right when COVID was coming out, because I was ecstatic. I'm like, oh my gosh, they're going to pull back all of climate change data. Because I was freaking out when I realized they had only taken in like certain volcanoes after I had got the data. It's just nuts. But they allegedly have redone it now, and I don't know if anybody's heard the updates on climate change.
Redone doesn't necessarily mean biologically safe. Remember when Fukushima blew up and they just raised the limit of what was safe for exposure to radiation?
But we should acknowledge some of the things that actually the benefit of the recalculations have added, especially feedback loops. When looking at feedback loops, we can say the reason why so many people are upset at looking at this new data is because it says that they have it published. You can find all of this information saying in the next, and Greta Thunberg's the one saying, well, the world's going to end, basically. The way you know it is ending quicker than you realize. Awesome. And that's the thing about that is it's a little bit truer than people want to talk about. Let's talk about Greenland for a second. Let's talk about the ozone layer. Looking at Greenland, you actually are about to see a larger canyon than the Grand Canyon by about 4 times. It's about 1,000 miles long. It's going to open up across Greenland. And there's going to be water that's going to feed into that that's already there. When it starts to defreeze, that's going to start pushing water, which is going to rapidly push water out, which is going to raise sea levels in our lifetimes. This is true. This is something that can and will happen. It's not necessarily because you use the aerosol spray can or something. It might happen more to volcanoes. It's probably about volcanoes. I think the carbon, and the other reason is because volcanoes mess with the thermosphere and the thermopause. And when the thermopause is messed with, the ozone depletes. And we have an ozone layer that's not it's constant. And this is so what is the ozone layer, Jeremiah? Can you explain what ozone is?
Ozone is a bonding of 3 oxygen atoms. It's highly carcinogenic for biological life, and it's also excellent at rediverting ultraviolet because it has a high absorption capability in that range. Ozone is quite necessary. It kills airborne contaminants and a variety of other things to kind of keep, and it also controls and regulates the buoyancy of different layers of our atmosphere. So
you kind of gave it away, but what's
produced though?
You kind of gave it away, but what are one of the things that we use ozone for aside from the ozone layer? What is something that we would use a triple bonded oxygen molecule for?
One of the things that it really does extremely well is pretty much kill everything biological and disintegrate biological molecules and proteins. So let's say that you had mold or something in your place. If you use an ozone generator to concentrate the ozone near where that mold is, that ozone would, if it's sustained in that area for a long enough period of time, seep into the wood or whatever else that mold is growing on and just get right down in there and start dissolving it at the core. It'll bust apart cells and pretty much kill all the spores. And it's one of the few things that can do that. It does take a while for exposure on certain things that are dried, like mold spores and certain types of bacteria that can form a husk around themselves as a protective layer. Will take a little while longer to react. But ultimately, ozone is an incredible oxidizer because O3 is not stable. O2 is stable, and that's why it's almost entirely what's in our atmosphere. But O3, one of those extra oxygen atoms, wants to bust off, and when it does, it'll try to give up a charge or rip a charge out so that it can become properly balanced. And that charge that it requires to be balanced out is going to come from whatever it touches, which is usually things that are sensitive that have loosely bonded charges like biological materials.
And so often ozone?
Jeremiah, I got one question. Why does monoatomic or solid ozone constantly form out of the spark gaps and like the plasma arcs everywhere?
The way ozone is formed in the upper atmosphere naturally is that high energy solar particles strike oxygen molecules with enough energy to bust apart the O2 so that you have 2 individual oxygens, but they're not going to just stay separate. They're going to bond with whatever oxygen is near them. So if they have enough energy, they'll ram into another O2 and stick to it, and those will start sharing charges. So then you get O3. The way that it's produced in high voltage arcs and discharges is the exact same mechanism. Basically, you have an arc between 2 electrodes, and it accelerates charges to a high velocity between those electrodes, and then they strike. O2 busted apart, and those will recombine and form O3. So it forms the same way. It's just that here you're using an electrical current in an arc instead of photoionization or particle bombardment with the sun.
So some people use ozone instead of chlorine in hot tubs, for instance, just to clean out a hot tub. And there's another interesting thing about ozone. Why is it that ozone layer that we have is not somehow even? Why is it that the ozone layer in certain parts of the world, you can find, for instance, across Chile, it's almost not there. It's completely thinned out across Chile, a country that has tons of volcanoes, tons of desert, tons of extremophile life. And yet you have other parts of the world where the ozone is very thick.
You can blast it with elements that change it. No, for a long.
Well, one of the biggest contributor to ozone again is solar radiation and high energy particles coming from the sun. So there's two things there. One, it's going to be the areas where the solar radiation is most likely to deliver particles onto the globe. So if you take a look at where particles will generally land with enough velocity and enough quantity to start creating a lot of ozone, if it's not high energy beams that basically traverse that entire distance where the atmosphere is thinner, it's going to be on the areas of the Earth where the sun hits the most and they get warm enough to create an increased conductivity of the air. And
how does the electromagnetic...
You see, just last thing really quickly, you see where this is showing the ozone concentration, and red and orange is highest. You see where that is on the Earth, right? Around Antarctica. Okay.
Yeah, it is
really
high
interesting. Volcanism too. That's by Erebus and where side of it. That's nuts.
Oh, it's also where like the not the Aurora Borealis, the other one, the south side Aurora.
Yeah, it could be that air slows down there and begins to circulate. It may drop down, and so it just might be that ozone can collect there because of the way that our general air currents are moving around the globe.
Remind everybody what a thick ozone layer does, and remind everybody what kind of life is at the place where the thickest ozone layer is. Right. So this is the thing. It's isolating, and it's very difficult for life to thrive because it produces a desert. But in the desert, extremophiles can thrive, but basically nothing else. Right.
Well, so I won't say there's a direct correlation there, because again, if you have too much UV blocking and too much scattering, then you're not going to get enough of the UV spectrum for some of the life. So it's a balance.
Unless you got it from somewhere else, like maybe you have a black sun underground or something crazy like that. But yes, otherwise, yes.
I have a question. How would the thickness or whatever the strength of the electromagnetic field affect that around our planet?
The strength of the electromagnetic field is going to control exactly where the high energy particles coming from the sun that are responsible for generating most of the ozone are going to hit the globe. So the electromagnetic fields are literally going to change those zones. And if they change for a small period of time or a little fluctuation, it's not going to be cumulative like what we're looking at in these ozone maps. But you will have temporary areas of production that's significantly higher, or areas that may not actually have much ozone production at all during the day, just as the currents change and the magnetic fluxes change, especially during solar events.
For people that are very interested in the Schumann resonance, they should look to the solar weather before the reflection in the Schumann resonance. A lot of people just focus on Schumann resonance and don't realize that it's being affected by solar weather.
It's an indicator of what is about to hit. What's about to hit long before it ever actually gets here, because those field fluxes are going to get here in 7 minutes, but the particles may take a good part of a day. And
exactly. A lot of people just like to look at the Schumann resonance and think that that's some indicator within the Earth itself when it's being affected by solar weather. So for everyone out there interested in Schumann resonance, take a heads up look from this solar weather.
I wanted to ask you one more thing about ozone real quick too before you jump to the next Schumann resonance. I was just going to ask the distance of so we have holes in the ozone, we have the ozone layer. What is that as far as like our atmospheric levels? I know there's a high level of hydrogen and helium in the upper atmosphere, but how far is that distance wise from that layer of ozone? Do you know?
Actually, I wish I could answer your question, but I haven't studied all the phenomena or the reasons for certain gaps in depth enough to really intelligibly answer that question. So sorry.
Okay. No,
that's Are you asking about particle interactions from solar weather?
Well, from let's say, so we have this ozone effect that is caused by various elements, And then you have it's really hard to find information about the upper atmosphere because it's high
Right.
hydrogen, high helium. It would create,
Some of
weightless
the theories are
environment.
that the ELF
but,
band actually is disrupting the ozone layer itself.
Is there a
the
specific
military
phenomena you're
and stuff.
referring to that you're observing?
Like by the Gwyn towers that the U.S. government uses?
So NASA's had a few theories about ELF and VLF band affecting the ozone layer, which are that because there's a heightened amount of radiation that we're producing and lifting that radiation with radio, because our shortwave and longwave radio actually is pushing the particulates in the aerosol up higher because they're being bounced further, that there's more reactions that are taking place which are disrupting and breaking down the oxygen bonds quicker in certain zones. And so it's kind of like the same reason glaciers are melting faster in certain places.
Operation Fishbowl was above and below, I thought. And so they were blasting different elements as high as they could get them. And it's right around the time that I think they discovered a hole in the ozone too, which is interesting. If you're looking at atmospheric sciences, I don't know. It's nuts though.
Remember, the hole in the ozone layer also tracks the solar cycle. It really is linked if you go back and look at it.
Oh, really?
From quite a while ago.
Sure.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
It's interesting. Yeah, I mean, so the more we look at the ozone layer and we start to think, though, that there's kind of a nature to weather, the more I'm convinced it's being manipulated by us, and it's hard to say what that nature really is.
And for how long, though? How long have we had the technology?
If there's a bigger change in the energy coming in, that we're just a small part of affecting this change within all of it.
The paranoid part of me thinks that there's going to be a huge CMP event at some point, and it'll be used as a cover for a man-made EMP event. But that's just me being paranoid.
Suspicious observer said we almost got fried the other day by a pretty close margin, but I didn't watch the video, so I couldn't say any more about it.
He's been going on.
That guy gave up everything to just study solar weather.
I would freak me out too if all you ever thought about was the size of this stuff. Yeah.
If you're interested in learning more about solar weather and how it's affecting the Earth, he's worth giving a few watches to, and you can decide for yourself if you want to keep watching. Suspicious observers, I believe.
I think I've
some of the some of the O's are zeros, possibly. Yeah.
Distant observers.
Yeah, I have to get back into that. Right when I found out about geoengineering, like
it is really good.
The disaster series is great.
Sorry, I'm just gonna run to the bathroom quick. I'll be right back.
For letting us
Word, do your business.
We'll handle it for you.
Exciting stuff.
Not there.
We'll hold it down.
Solar flare, though, I mean, regardless of our geostationary heliocentric perspectives, is an intense localized eruption of electromagnetic radiation in the sun's atmosphere. So if that's in our own atmosphere, that's basically everyone's terror. And we keep thinking it's coming, and what will it do? Well, on one hand,
what's coming is the solar maximum, and they're estimating that between 2024 and 2025. They think it might arrive a bit earlier, and they're reporting lower X-class solar flares right now. So we are definitely heading towards the peak of the solar maximum.
All I have to interject quickly is that imagine if a Carrington event size flare hit us today, and how much hectic it rocked 200 or 150 years ago to what it would do to collapsing everything that we are
you
today.
Talking about the event where it melted the railroad track metal?
Yeah, any lines that are north to south are going to get fried.
It would even make
a solar cycle is 22 years, and the maximum is like half of that 22-year cycle. But there is a much larger cycle of cycles combined that indicate whether they're going to be more mild or more intense in the solar maximum period. So it's been estimated that we're heading out of the more mild solar maximums, and possibly the next solar cycle we go into that many of us might live through in this the second half, the solar maximum period, that could be quite intense.
We should go to
The
Shasta.
Diehold
Yeah,
Foundation
everybody go
says
in
But
and
of
out.
course, when asked about it, former
Hit the
CIA
caves.
director said, "We're going to be fine." We being Ted Koppel or whatever, they're going to be fine because they've got some underground lead-walled places they think will survive the EMP. So it'll be more like 99% of the population will be completely reset, but there'll be just a few people.
That's what I'm saying. Are we gonna get hit by a mild CMP that coincides with a man-made EMP that knocks all of our technology
what's
out?
man-made now? Because if China supposedly made their own sun, can they create a solar flare like with their man-made sun, or was it? You know what I mean? Is that going to be the narrative of what actually happens after the reset if they're gonna?
Well, a man-made sun just sounds like a trajectory for a man-made EMP, in my opinion. So
that's what I'm saying.
Actually,
it's like they're burying it.
Would an EMP set off like ammunition, like bullets and stuff, though?
Well,
are you talking about would it trigger major like missiles, ammunition,
like a
nukes, or
Carrington
something
event
like that?
will set off like your just standard like gun ammunition in your house.
No, you would find it incredibly difficult to do that.
The guns are mechanical. They're not going to fire on their own.
The electric charge hitting the shell and making it detonate.
Yeah, no, that's not.
That would have to be really intense. I can't see that happening without the mechanical motion of pulling the trigger.
I was just going based
on trucks will operate.
That's not what he's asking. That's not what he's asking. He's saying the electrical current that's induced due to the electromotive flux that is passing through the layers of brass and the little steel end cap and everything else inside. Could that be enough or generate a charge that might create either enough heat or a percussive disturbance to actually set off the powder, which is
I think it's possible. I think it's possible depending on your area.
The area is too small for the bullet. The conduction is way too high, and the amplitude of the signal that would actually have to hit that thing
I was meaning like a CME that would fry a country.
Yeah, what I'm saying is even if somebody had knocked out, if there was an EMP that was large enough to knock out all of the entire North America, it would not be enough if detonated at whatever altitude to set off any kind of ammunition like that.
You're talking about devices that are mechanical in operation, not
guns,
electronic.
ammunition, not guns, ammunition.
Okay.
So
I have tested this.
I wasn't saying EMP either.
Oh, you've tested this.
By any means, CME, CMP, EMP, it's not going to matter. The amplitude is just not high enough.
What did your test results, producer? How did you test it?
So I ran spark gaps past black powder that wasn't even concealed in metal, and it's really hard to set off. Like, it's really, really hard. If you had some solar event that would melt the ammunition or heat it up enough to set it off, it would kill all the people anyway.
I was going to say, everybody would die. We would die too.
You can detonate it with plasma. There's a guy called Suckboy Tony who has a plasma pump action rifle thing that he's working on. It's black powder and plasma ignited, so it's doable. But
I'm sure
you have
it
to design it
like
specifically for it.
I was just going by what suspicious observers had mentioned.
Oh, this is
Suspicious
interesting.
Observer is not an electrical engineer.
That's great.
Like, he's not. I've calculated out the numbers.
Well said.
Right. I've calculated out the numbers for an X1000 flare, which is what he's worried about. And although it would melt anything with long power lines or potentially power cords plugged in, it's not going to touch anything small. Your phone is going to be fine. That stuff, you're not going to have to worry about that. Your little SD card.
Well, technically, Adam,
he's talking about it's going to like melt
receiver will be
anything facing the sun at the time. People, everything. That's what the aspect of what he was speaking on the CME that I was referring to.
Well, the two different parts of it. The one is what the sun is going to do with that initial flash. That will melt everything on that side of the Earth. And the other thing, you're going to get those magnetic fields reverberating around. So it'll hit the electronics in the whole planet. It doesn't matter what side of Earth you're facing. It's still going to wipe out your power grid.
Right.
And then the other thing, when it forces those... I think they're the Birkeland currents up in the upper atmosphere. When it forces them down and squeezes them, you're going to get lightning big enough to do something like carve out the Grand Canyon. If you're near one of those spots, you're done.
Water levitate too, or something? Like come up through the ground?
Right. You would expect horrible flooding. You would expect something like potentially 12 foot of rain in an hour. You would get absolutely torrential downpours. There's a reason why the Great Basin is probably going to fill up, looking at like Edgar Casey's map, is because when that happens, you're going to get so much rain, it's just going to fill up because there's nowhere for it to go in the Great Basin. You know, especially like what happens if it literally like, you know, blows off how much water from the Atlantic because it literally boils it with that flash. All that water is going to be up in the air as well. You're going to get enormous rainstorms.
And if we have a polar excursion, like with the whole planet stopping, there's going to be just water sloshing. If it does do that or go to that extreme, anyway. Like,
so it's going to be a really bad week.
Oh yeah.
Do you go inside the Earth then, get as deep as you can, or is there locations where you know it's going to be safer when the solar flares hit? Is that what these people are tracking?
A lot of them are saying around the equator, like in Africa or western sides of mountains, but I don't think they'd be safe there because I think there's a reason that there's large hollowed out places around the equator in like area. I think maybe that there's like something that is pulled outward from the center of the planet. Personally, that's my estimation, and I feel like around the equator is the worst place to be. As opposed to
it's a horrible place. You want to be about 45 degrees.
I'd probably go to Mount Shasta. Oh, is that not good either?
By the way, I got a personal phone call with Suspicious Observer with Ben Davidson. One of my friends paid for it, and I had a half-hour conversation with him. And he said, basically, you don't want to be in the wave of any of the sloshback, and you want to be ready for watermelon-sized hail to start raining down on you. Said if you're ready for that, you're probably fine. He said you wanted to be about 3 foot under the ground, like a good root cellar with 3 foot of dirt on the top or a fallout shelter, and you'd probably be okay.
Really? For the watermelon size hail, but what about for the solar flare? How deep would you need to be to?
It's supposed to hit the Indian Ocean next
out.
Okay.
So when it happened before, there were small mammals that lived through it that tunneled under like 6 inches under the ground, and they were fine when you look in the archaeological record. So I don't think you have to go that deep. So this giant lightning is going to carve out what?
What about the flooding aspect of it?
Yeah, avoid that.
The flooding.
The flooding is going to be a problem actually, because we already know that an extremely high electrical charge that's not normal to that area where the water table is close enough to the surface, it will pull up the most conductive materials. It's called dielectrophoresis and electrophoresis. Those two things together, the dirt is less conductive than the water that is flowing through it. So the dirt will try to stay in place, and the water will be pulled up by the electrical current as it attempts to neutralize, carrying all those electrons to the extremely increased downwards ion drift, which could be like literally, amps per square meter in that kind of event.
And the water is going to be electrified because there's going to be tons of down power lines, and so you're going to have like things getting petrified and things just it's not just water. It's like, don't you think that's what happens? It's like an electric. It's like electrically charged water.
What do you think about?
Yeah, I could say this. I mean, you'll have dried things that are sticking up in the air, like telephone poles, stuff like that are catching fire from St. Elmo's fire due to the incredible amounts of charge. And then after they're catching fire and burning, then water will start getting sucked up through those things and start getting wicked up into the atmosphere and put them out. So it's going to be a really wild.
Is there just going to be electrical stuff flowing through the water then? Whoa.
There's basically be so much charge that if you were to stand outside, your body would be completely encompassed in painful pricks everywhere. It would be almost unbearable. You'd hear an extremely loud hissing as your hair stood on end, and crackling came over all of your clothes. Yeah. And even on your eyelashes and things like that, it would be
familiar with.
But I'm talking specifically if you're in the water. How far is that going to spread? Like, is all the water electric until all the stuff is?
Yeah, you would not want to be in the water
everywhere. And
and it's all going to be. You're going to just be electrocuted.
Tsunamis. It perfectly what we're describing sounds like the end of a civilization and mass reset, which we seem to have a lot of evidence for in the past. So,
but we'll build the inner Earth.
Wipes out 4%.
Location.
Only 4%.
Bad things only happen to other people. Okay.
True. There we go.
And the Diehold Foundation is supposedly building a shelter that it makes its own, has its own air system and watertight seals, kind of like Cappadocia, but like more modern and protected towards that certain event. I didn't know if you guys followed Douglas Vogt and the Diode Foundation. It was a big inspiration to suspicious observers.
I'm gonna start digging on my land though and start building in ground.
I don't know if I want to go that way. It's like maybe we got another few hundred years or 500. You know, like
well,
they say 20.
Not this generation.
The temperature gets really stable after you get a couple feet under. In Canada, you can have tomatoes growing indoors all year round. I don't know. Sounds good to me.
I like where your head's at, Simon. Let's start building caves.
Yeah,
and as Wally pointed out,
that's why I like West Virginia.
I've already started digging.
And that's true, Wally.
We sound like crazy preppers.
I like my Schumann resonance coil. It makes me feel more balanced, less ADHD. Like it's USB powered, and it puts out the 7.83 or whatever hertz.
Bring the coil up close to the camera there, Aaron.
Yeah, hold on. I gotta unplug it to do so, but yeah.
I want one of those. It just helps you focus.
They're $5 on AliExpress.
Nice.
But
what is it called?
It's just a Schumann resonance.
Emitter.
Yeah, pretty much. It's just a little board, and that's it pulsing the frequency right there, and it actually makes my mom fall asleep if it's in the same room with her, like almost every time. It's kind of strange.
Wow.
I don't know. I feel relaxed.
That's awesome.
Nice. That's pretty dope.
Yeah, I'll look into that.
So I've actually been wondering if it affects it by putting like one of these on it. Like on top of it. I've been wondering if it will amplify
to other people. Interesting.
Very good question. I suspect so.
Copper pyramid or something like that.
Maybe that's what some of those towers were used for, to project the Schumann resonance on the population.
How deep would a home built underground need to be safe from solar flares, EMPs, etc., from new anomaly productions?
It's going to depend how, what you're under, really. Because if you're under force, it's going to be different from under
like a cage, something that can block as much of those frequencies as possible.
There's a tornado shelter.
If you want to be safe from the you want to look at Tesla's, Nikola Tesla's patent on the lightning rod. That's the one you want, and you want to be at least 3 foot under the ground.
3 feet.
At least 3 feet in under soil, and probably 5 minimum. Maybe that's.
I'm just glad my neighbor across the street, and I'm the only one that knows about it because I've lived in this place longer than anyone else on the street, and I'm just glad to know that there's it's actually a fallout shelter. It's not a tornado shelter, because we don't really have tornadoes in West Virginia that often, but I'm happy to know that it's there and no one else does.
Well, now everybody does.
You can say that.
I'm sure a lot of West Virginia will be watching.
What if people move there now? Everybody's going to
near the camera. Fascinating.
Yeah, I feel calm now too. Maybe it's because we're like the only three.
We need to put the human resonance through.
We could get glow sticks.
I'm here.
No.
Oh,
we're all here.
I'm not here in the Zen sense of things.
But you're not here either. You can't be 100% certain. Are you 0 or are you infinity?
Hitchhiker's Guide. I'm more like the improbability of a factor of 8 to 1 to 8. Yeah, 800.
So you're a theoretical concept. You're abstract. You're not actually tangible.
You exist on the internet. Like we
all
do.
What switch was that dude pulling? Oh, now it's gone.
That's the one to turn on the high voltage for the corn crop outside.
Right. No, there was actually some value to that. I'm sorry. I apologize. No, this was important. Actually, at one point, I was really interested in this. Cultivating Vegetables with Electricity article that we were looking at earlier. So he's actually got these telephone cables, but they're used to bring electricity and ground it into the farm, right? So that the farm would get the electricity, which would then improve the vegetables and in the yield. Right, that's the goal here, and also maybe not require pesticides because electricity probably bothers certain kinds of plants.
Ultraviolet light too can
That's
increase
the
your growth.
story.
I wonder if they're using that in
Well,
the
it's like an
hydroponics, agricultural labs as well.
The electromagnetics.
Antenna array above it. That's
Well, if
fascinating.
it does,
stuff.
if we do get totally blacked out by a SAI or like a year without a summer event, you can totally grow plants in full cloud coverage without the sun.
Night scene of an English high frequency plant
with
grower.
lighting.
I mean,
I don't know
these
if
aren't people
hydroponic
who say
plants
they're-
are less nutritious. I just know you can grow them in
Oh, no,
cold
they're
climates.
There's nothing wrong with
Yeah.
hydroponic plants.
And
You still need the
they're
sun,
more insulated from pollution that would be exposed in the open air from runoff rain, etc., the wind.
Yeah, but one of these days I'm gonna do one of those woofing trips to Japan and just work in a rice field. I'm pretty sure that there's still some reason that you want to just grow rice in deep mud and not necessarily hydroponic. Aquaponics, I'm really interested in the idea of having vaporous aquaponic, where you're spraying a high pressure vaporous solution in a long vertical garden. I like that idea also. Tower gardens.
Well, is it a 100% self-sustaining system? There used to be an initiative in my city where they had a fish farm that produced compost that they recycled to fuel nutrients into the hydroponic vegetables that were growing. So it was a building that was 100% interconnected.
In the U.S., when they raise rice, or grow rice rather, they also raise crayfish alongside it, and they have the same cycle. So when you flood it, it's perfect time for them.
Giant knows about soil, and so some people have the belief that the soil is essential in getting the nutrients and certain things, and I don't know enough about that, but he would be a good person.
I believe it is.
It absolutely is. The topsoil has been depleted, and it has to be replenished with the appropriate type of compost, and that can also be done hydroponically. But if you're just buying the vegetables in the middle of winter locally in a cold state hydroponically, and you don't know the processes for growing those vegetables, you can't ascertain the nutrient level. I would just presume that it's cleaner or less toxic than when you would get in a major grocery chain store that focuses on GMO vegetables.
So,
I will say this about hydroponics, and I've done some of my own indoor plants with hydroponics. Some of the weirder ones, like peppers, for example. Did some hydroponic tomatoes, which work actually really well. A lot of people do those because they're pretty easy. Anyways, yeah, hydroponics, it comes with a catch. So it's entirely based on what your nutrient source is. You can get all kinds of different brands and mixes for different types of plants that will have all of your major nutrients that the plants actually need to grow. And when you look at them, they're not going to really look a whole lot different than a soil-grown plant. The difference is the micronutrients and phytonutrients are a lot of times lacking. And so there are sort of two different approaches to hydroponics. You either have a completely synthetic approach where, say, you have a small container with just a circulator pump or a bubbler inside of it, and it's just this one container, that's it. But regardless, it's an enclosed system, and only what you put into it is exactly what it does. Then you have another approach, which is you have a large cycling system where some of the water is continuously passed through either rocks or dirt and then filtered or
derived from like a small fish farm.
Well, again, the fish farm is still not going to be able to produce these other phytonutrients if they don't already exist in the water.
Sure. No, what you want to have is like 4 layers here. You can have like 2 pumps and a pump, and it brings it to the back and it cycles it through the garden, and the fish poop is brought and it's brought back to the garden, and then that goes through. And actually some people actually have a 4th one here that you swim in, because at the end of it can be super purified water, and then that goes back into the cycle and can be fed in the nutrients as well. So you can have I forget what that's called, where you have the pool that's like cleans itself because it's a living biodynamic pool. But it's part of it is that as you go further along, there's areas you don't swim in that have swamp essentially, or have moss and chlorophyll producing. And beyond that, you have the retinol bacteria that's being produced from the feces of the fish. But then that fertilizes and creates this fertilizer that goes back to the plants and the whole system.
Right. And if you think about even like a simple hydroponic system that just uses some kind of nutrient source, that's a natural nutrient source like dirt, for example, and then feeds the water. Plant roots aren't absorbing, they aren't absorbing dirt. They aren't absorbing any of the other things in the ground except for what is delivered to them through the water, which means the water has to dissolve those nutrients in the dirt, and then they're delivered through that mechanism through the water into the root system. So if you keep that simple fact in mind, hydroponics, which some people have a major issue with, saying that there's just no way they could ever possibly be as healthy as dirt plants, well, that's not true, because if you just take a big old bucket of dirt and you mix it up with water and then you let it sit for basically a day, the dirt is going to settle down to the bottom and you're going to end up with some fairly clear water sitting on the top. And that clear water is full of the same nutrients that the plant roots would absorb anyway. So as long as you're using that as a natural source, and you're not just using some synthesized blend from, a hydroponics store, then you can get it. And there are microbes that'll grow and live in the soil that aren't going to be available in the hydroponic solution. But that's not, again, it's not really a problem.
Actually,
because those microbes are really only necessary to help fight against other pests and things that are in the soil and to help break down certain things in the soil. And if your soil source, you have microbes in the soil, if those microbes are breaking down nutrients in the soil itself, and then you're straining that off and taking the water from that, you're still getting that same output.
Also, you're constantly the problem. Okay, so here's the thing, and thinking about monoculturing and the way McDonald's has gotten all the potatoes and Starbucks has gotten all the coffee out of a place, and how they shock the area, soak out the nutrients, destroy it. Even France, with their geoengineering, they're trying to fix what they did with wine, right? They've pulled out all their nutrients. And there's a movie I just saw again recently with Alan Rickman. I think it's his last movie, where he's a British guy going around America. He goes to California because the wine in France is dying. And this actually happened. Most of the best wines in France went extinct in the 70s, 60s and 70s, because they destroyed their agriculture. They pulled all the nutrients out of the soil. And if you look around the world, right, this is what people did to every place. And what's going on now, we're turning all of the greenest places to desert. Even the rainforest is being converted to agriculture, and we're sucking all the nutrients out of it. So that very soon will be like the Sahara. Now, in California, they had some French families that saved some of the fermentation processes. And so in 1976, the United States, California won the best Chardonnay, and they exported back to France some of those grapes and figured out ways of saving those wines, or else they wouldn't have existed in the future or today. But we're at this precipice where, and also it makes me think about the Sahara, because we always talk about the Sahara being blue, right, with sea and the mega Chad, but it was green before, right? We know that there was the lakes and there was the water, the Taman Reset, and now it's desert. I'm starting to think that this really does have something to do with the last monoculture period, because this was probably where the major agriculture was produced with all that water for the world at that point. And it was probably decimated. The nitrogenation was not considered, or something. And that could be I think some of this climate change stuff that they teach us about and they make us afraid of might actually have some bearing on our reality.
Yeah. And so electroculture, the potential of it is to be able to substitute having to worry about a lot of those aspects of the nutrients if you're getting the right energy in and the fields in, that you'll be able to feed or grow the plants.
Right. I mean, you can do this
across spectrums too.
But the irony here is that in usually we're trying to find the flattest place with the most fertile soil, and we're destroying it. And what we should be doing, and what we're starting to do, is we're going to these places where you cannot grow anything because it's the cheapest place to be. And that's where you build your vertical gardens for your aeroponic system.
Like in the Andes.
Well, that's the perfect place to do solar. So
you can put solar right on top of your vertical aeroponic systems. I mean, the point of this is that 1 acre becomes a square acre or cubic acre, because you can actually build vertically, or you can actually go deeper. So instantly, anywhere there was just one plant,
using the water on those.
Well, it's also, you're using much less water, and it's actually memory water, because it's being through vapor force. Vortex. So this is the future, but it's probably also the past if we're talking about the correct way of doing things. It's not so crazy of a technological advancement to spray water vertically and let it drip down, right?
But
this is something that could have existed 1,000 years ago.
There's electromagnetic frequencies, and there's also UV light radiation that alters the growth of plants. So it kind of expands the fields when you're talking about growth factors. And if we have another year without a summer, or a complete blackout where we can't use the sun to help with that, there's other ways to grow plants indoors. So
I've had a lot of success with my hybrid system. I take these seamless gutters and I have them angled, right? And I put a little bit of dirt all the way down, and I basically have valves at the top dripping a solution that I have just customized basically. And I've been using the same 325 kilohertz signal as per what I was suggested by the guys in Russia that I was in contact with, that I got some of this from. But like Alexander Mission's work, like it does touch on plants and stuff like that, and it seems to have accelerated the growth of my my greenery that I've been growing. And
what lighting do you have? Do you have a different lighting?
I use
purple light.
Well, it depends on whether it's flowering or otherwise. Okay. I grow weed. It's legal here, so I can talk about that.
No, that's fine. Yeah, totally. I'm just wondering, like, different plants respond to different types of lights, and then obviously different types of frequencies and being emitted or hertz.
Well, when I'm going like 24 hours light, I haven't had any difference or noticed any difference between LED and like what's the word for long bar things? The gas.
Phosphorescent?
Yes, thank you. Like halogen, whatever the shit that gives people headaches and buzzes. Yeah, I know a lot of people that use the like grow light version of those that they'd like get at Lowe's or something like that. And personally, I find the LEDs, you can get the lights closer and not too close because it can like overdose them on it. But then in the flowering part, I use a full spectrum bulb, basically like a huge full spectrum bulb. It has UV, it has infrared, and it has reddish and blue. And I usually mix that with a yellow, like old school light bulb, like, and it usually is a good combo when it's flowering, when I'm doing 12 and 12.
Oh yeah, cannabis is an incredibly complicated plant in terms of its programmability. It will literally respond to different light amplitudes of the same wavelength in order to control its cycle, and it will be controlled in terms of when it's going to go to bud, or if you want it to grow a certain way. Different wavelengths of light it will absorb, because it unlike some plants that only absorb a fraction of the wide spectrum, the 7 different, I think it's more than 7 now, 7 types of chlorophyll that we've identified that all have different duties and absorb different wavelengths of light. But that
it also depends on whether
it absorbs all of them, and it needs all of them, and it uses them to tell it what part of the cycle it should be in and how it should grow. So you can literally change the light and change
tomato plants, though. Say there's certain lights that impact that may not even be associated with it. Like, you know,
just a minor correction, Jeremiah. There are auto flowering cannabis plants now. I don't remember what the exact.
Oh, I don't know about all the growth things. I'm saying that they're all, even the auto flowering ones, I'm sure they're still responsive to different wavelengths of light in terms of how they're going to grow, how wide and tall they'll grow, and you know how much.
You can shock them to the point where they're frozen dead, and they'll get a lot stronger even.
People literally just put them in like 20, 24-hour like light cycles. It's ridiculous. You can just
that is nuts.
Constantly.
I use 24 hours whenever I am until I start budding and like flowering process. I use 24 all the time.
Okay, so you're doing this with flower and whatnot, herb. These studies have been done though with like potatoes and like things that we need as far as food, right? And so I'm wondering, there's something about like purple earth and purple lighting. It'd be interesting for Jeremiah to weigh in on that stuff. Andreas,
yeah, we've tested this actually. We've tested a variety of different grow lights on a whole bunch of different food plants. And what we found is that one of the best ways to get a nice wide spectrum is the use of phosphor LEDs, which are generally like your warm whites, work very, very well. You'll generally see an LED sold with a K number. It'll be like 3,500K, 6,000K. That number doesn't mean zip all in terms of whether or not plants are going to respond well to it. If it does not have a spectrum listed on the box, or if you can't look it up and figure out what its actual spectral output is, then you have no idea what you're getting. But some types of phosphors, they're like a 5 or 6 different type of phosphor mixture that are coated over the UV reactive or the UV output LED or deep blue LED. And so those ones are going to give you a pretty wide spectrum light. I just found ones that had the full spectrum. They have 6 different major node outputs, and they cover pretty much the wide band. What they don't have is anything above 660 nanometers, and they have absolutely nothing below 430 nanometers. And both of those 2 ranges, you do need some infrared. So a full spectrum LED lamp that's expensive, it will have some infrared LEDs on it, and it will also have some UV 365 nanometer LEDs and a few 405 nanometer LEDs. So
you just described
basically
this.
But if you take like an actual Rife, like an old school Rife machine, and get frequencies playing, and you have or different hertz playing that they've tuned in with different lighting, can you create like some Uber plants and some Uber breeds? You think?
Well, we're
or
going to
what?
find that out because Gerald is actually testing exactly that.
What? I love this show. I love it. Sorry, what's happening?
He's literally been working on it. He has a light that's being powered directly by his pulsed electromagnetic coil system, and the 2 things operate synchronously. So he's going to be using those to see if both the pulse light output on his full spectrum LED source and the electromagnetic fields from his pulse coil are going to be able to work in unison to continuously increase the growth rate of the plants and health.
When we have to go inside the earth from the CMPs,
this is Gerald, of course.
We can grow these plants.
I haven't done it in such a controlled, like scientific way, but like just using this rodent coil in proximity to the plants in combination with the full spectrum lights in the flowering period has made the results like noticeably different, in my opinion. But I haven't done it in such a controlled way.
Yeah, he's already had results over 30% difference.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's without the pulse lights.
Wow.
Oh, he pulses the lights?
He's going to be doing in some upcoming tests, yeah.
Is he filming all this somewhere to document? So
he's putting it all up on his channel, one little short video at a time.
I need to follow this.
Yeah, here we can play his most recent video right now. Actually, that's
to give context. At least everyone's on the same page then.
Gerald's a good guy. Actually posted the link for this video in the live chat.
All right. This side here.
You might actually want to play the one before this.
Jar. This jar represents the 100 mung beans that were pulsed on.
Where he shows the coil.
I'll just watch later. No, that's awesome.
Smooth and with no artificial sweeteners.
I wonder if the 8-sided pyramid, like the Great Pyramid, is like makes a difference. Like what the difference between it and the 4-sided is. Like, always wondered that.
It has to do with pulsed electromagnetic fields through.
It has to do with the mass. It doesn't really make too much difference in the geometry.
This one's been nicknamed the reactor. It's kind of a neat nickname, but anyway. So what we have is the setup. Is we have a function generator pulsing at 7.83 hertz, 50% duty cycle square wave at 20 volts per pulse. You'll see the pulses on the LED here. You'll also see me demonstrate the South Pole up top and the North Pole on the bottom with this compass. What we will do is, once you've seen the South Pole on the compass, we're going to pulse these seeds for 30 minutes of the South Pole for germination purposes. And we are turning the function generator on in 3, 2, 1. As you can see, the LEDs are pulsing. The compass shows south. Let me turn this so that we can fit it underneath here. As you can see, the compass shows north below and south above. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the compass down below, and I'm going to turn the coil upside down so that you can see up above is north, down below is south. So as you can see, it's south down below. What we're going to do now is we're going to take this cup with the seeds on it. And I've measured this so that only the South Pole is pulsing the seeds. And the north being up top of the coil, as you go down, south pole, right at the tip where the seeds sit. All right, ladies and gentlemen, for 30 minutes, I'll be pulsing this. And you will see the continuation in this video shortly. All right, here's the setup. This side here, this is 100 mung beans in each jar. This jar represents the 100 mung beans that were pulsed on the south side of the vortex coil at 50% duty cycle square wave at 7.83 cycles per second, 20 volts pulse. This jar here with 100 mung beans had the beans sitting in here for 3 days in the dark. This jar with 100 mung beans was taped to the south side of this neodymium magnet for 6 hours. And I've timed it so that they're all sort of set up to go in the dark at the exact same time for growth. So now I'm going to take these 3 jars and I'm going to put them in the dark, and the next video you'll see is where that they'll be displayed. And now we're starting the timer to see if there's any difference between each of these growths and the control. All right, ladies and gentlemen.
All right, so that was a little bit of...
Oh my God, it's fascinating.
Who was supposed to be here
just
today,
seeds.
but
This
he'll
is
be on tomorrow.
Seed treating or seed like curing.
You can germinate them faster.
Oh yeah, he's not going to stop at the seeds though. He'll be going all the way.
Yeah, he's going to do it through the growth.
Sweet.
Yep.
Sweet.
And then you can do experiments beyond this where you're doing just the seeds or just the growth.
Yeah, that's what he's going to. He's starting with just the seeds, but he's already implementing a system for an entire room dedicated to basically a combined technology where it uses specific lights, feedback systems, direct air circulation.
Looking for interns? Because seriously,
yeah, he doesn't take interns.
I'm just kidding, but this is like
he also lives in
really
Canada,
exciting.
so.
It's really exciting.
We're all going to start doing this ourselves.
Oh yeah, it's going to be in our schools, and kids are going to be doing experiments like this and going into these fields. So
I learned from a kid in school about how Wi-Fi routers kill plants on the inverse.
Potentially.
Yeah, true.
We gotta. You should do an experiment. Do the same plants in the same lighting unit in separate rooms. One by your Wi-Fi router, and then another one on the opposite side of the house.
I did move all my plants out of the room. I have my helium thing, the lower wind.
Experienced it. Well, now you got to record it on camera.
Everybody should be doing experiments like these.
Wow. It was in the instruction
I plan on
book.
doing outdoor experiments here.
Yeah, that's awesome, too.
I've got a big garden, and I've got one of those odd vortex points where the currents from the sun, when it hits the planet, it comes in right next to my garden. I plan on moving where that hits to the middle of my garden this year, and I am all set to go try it and see what in the world it does. Because in my mind, this is basically electron charge clusters, and bacteria can eat electron charge clusters directly. There's 10 different bacteria that does it all differently. So I'm pretty sure it's just directly food for the plant, and that's how it's working and why it's doing it. And if that's the case, it means it's not hard to figure out how to push these around. We know what electric polarity attracts an electron. It's not going to be that hard to pull them out of the air.
Super spot. Yeah, that's
Uncle
awesome.
Kenny.
Like that. Wow. Wow.
Oh, by the way, how I found that spot was I used 2 compasses on a little stick and wandered around till they didn't match direction anymore. You can find some weird spots on the planet doing that. That's in my last video.
I need to start.
Say that again, Adam.
All these channels. Jeez Louise.
Yeah, I missed
so you take like little
videos.
You do like a wooden stick or something not magnetic, about, I don't know, 8 inches a foot long. Stick a compass on each side of it, and then walk around, and you'll see them misalign in certain spots by maybe 5 or 10%. It's not much, but mostly they get kind of lazy. They don't really track north very well in the middle of it. And if you walk around and find those spots, I've got a little handheld 300,000 volt power supply. So if I turn that on and point it up in the sky, it will pull down that energy right to, I can force it to a spot, but if I find one of those natural points, then it really flows in well because it was already heading that way. there's a spot at the edge of my garden that your hair stands up on end just normally. And if I turn on the generator, you absolutely feel it pouring down. But anyway, 2 compasses, walking around and check those angles. If you've got like tiny, like 3/4 inch diameter compasses, you can hardly see it. You need kind of bigger ones because it's not that much of a variance.
What
The most
about
I've seen
rods
is
that
about
use to
10
find
degrees
oil?
off, where they're, only.
Those
What?
rods that used to find oil in water, like divining rods, couldn't you use those as well?
Oh,
This is a
I'm
scientific
no good at
measurement.
that.
I mean, you can literally look at the needle deflection and see where these things are. It's no need to divine, no need to.
Well, I'm just saying they use it to this day to
direct
find oil wells and stuff. It has to have some measure of science to it because it works.
Yeah, you're gonna be able to find it with your witching rods too. You will come up to the same points because you're holding the things that are gonna respond to your electric charge. So yes.
The great part about this is that like literally anybody, no matter how out of tune and dead they are, a robot could basically use the same device and still find these fields.
You don't
can
have
fly
to
around
be
a
in
drone
tune
and find these fields.
Yeah, very, very cool. Cool tech. That's awesome. Because not everybody can witch or be a witcher, or whatever you call it.
Or like I'm sure fat Texas guys that eat Burger King all the time don't have any special abilities.
No, maybe. I don't know.
I know one that
you can be very subtle with witching, and you can find, okay, there's lots of things underground. So what is it that's underground? And witchers are often able to tell you if it's oil, if it's water, what is it that's underground, not just that there's something.
But something happens, and some people have an impact where they don't spin, or you'll have people walk through the same area, and for 2 of the people, the witching wands will go crazy, and then for the other 2, it doesn't do anything.
It depends on your electromagnetic field, I believe.
Yes, for sure. No, I've witnessed that, and it blew my mind.
Because you are the actual device or the instrument, and that's just sort of like the indicator on the instrument.
Or maybe you just didn't use like fabric softener, and you're wearing something that's got like too high of an electric charge. So
I've looked into ground penetrating radar and thermal scans, satellite thermal scans, and a variety of other technologies that are supposed to, all kind of work together, computer analyze to find these locations. But one thing I don't see out there is longitudinal pulse technology, which would allow it to effectively penetrate straight through incredible amounts of Earth. And you could effectively tune the attenuation based on exactly the length of the pulse and the rise time to go straight through most materials and be absorbed by something specific that you want to observe. So the great thing about that is the scattering is extremely minimal and generally comes back in the same direction that it was sent out with far less divergence. So it would be a more accurate technology, but unfortunately, longitudinal pulse technology is not really in our current electrodynamics, so you don't see manufacturers making it. And those who do make machines for this,
be done
a lot. They don't rent them out. They will go out to the location with their own people, use their own machines, never let anybody know how the hell they work because that's their industry secret, and help you find your oil or whatever else that you're looking for, your groundwater tables. Awesome. They're not using divine rides, they're using Tesla technology. But again, those companies keep that stuff under lock and key because that is their secret of how that stuff works.
Madness.
Anyone want to buy a LiDAR puck?
Ooh.
Oh yeah.
I got one really cheap. I just want what I got in it back out of it, basically, because I can't afford a drone to do what I originally wanted to with it because it's 800 grams in weight.
Okay. Hey, I have to leave. I just want to thank everybody. I have to work in the morning, but this has been mind-blowing. I did not think we would talk about geoengineering. I've learned so much. I have taken notes to go look into some things, and it was just a pleasure being here. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
Brittany.
And
thank you for being here.
Have a good night.
Much love.
Chill.
Have good sleep. All right.
Tell Andreas, good night.
Yeah, I might be like I'll be 1 foot in, 1 foot out.
Okay.
You've been pretty quiet, so I figure both you and her are probably going to be heading out pretty quick.
It's later, a few hours later than I was used to because the jet lag thing exists.
I'm not used to quiet under this.
No worries, brother. All good. So I'd like Jeremiah. I know he's not your favorite guy, but I think it's a half decent episode. Ken Wheeler here put out on Electroculture last week.
I haven't seen it, so it'll be the first time I'm watching. If you're gonna play,
I didn't either.
Yeah, I'm gonna play a bit of it right now, and I've got it. Don't worry, I got it loaded through Twitter, so no ads this time around.
I'm gonna have to walk you through.
I will say he's getting better. He's getting a little more humble as I think the world hands him his ass and kind of puts his ego in check. But there's still, I don't know, the underlying attitude, I guess, is kind of still there. But he is getting better. I imagine over enough time he'll probably be.
Exactly. He's coming back down to earth, both in. He's a great guy, but like more open in that his theory isn't the only theory ever, and that he is not the only one in the whole world every time to come up.
Yeah, he had to resend that video too. He's totally wiped that thing offline.
That's good. That's good. I've got a lot of respect for Ken, and he does bring up some great points here, and he goes into pretty technical detail that I would appreciate your thoughts on. So I'm going to play a bit of it right now, if that is okay.
All right. Spare me not the 21 minutes, though. Pick the good parts.
Yeah, exactly. We'll play like the first 5-6 minutes.
I've watched it, and he does
My text
not
guy
know
said that's because I didn't have many
very
to
well.
Yeah, and there's a few things that I very strongly disagree with on him here too. Like when he's starting out and like saying geometry has nothing to do with it, like scoffs at pyramids. It's just like facepalm. Like, Ken, you're so ignorant to so many.
I haven't seen it yet, but I'll make a prediction. I expect that what he's going to do is imagine you have a blog article writer that basically skims a bunch of other people's work and then tries to put it into their own words because they also want to be viewed as being, extremely intelligible. So they kind of cram a bunch of stuff together and make it their own. And the title of the article might be something like "How I Discovered the Secrets of This or This Thing," and then they'll use everybody else's work and kind of briefly maybe mention names, once or twice. But that's basically what you're looking at here. Is kind of like a blog writer that kind of sort of understands stuff, but he's got his own words that he really wants to throw in there because they're longer and they are 3 or 4 or 5 syllables in some cases, and makes him sound smarter. So that's what you're looking at. Right. But I could be wrong. That was my prediction. I haven't seen it yet, so let's see if I'm totally wrong and I'm gonna eat my words, or if I'm right.
I think you might eat some of those words, but half of it's right.
Deductions. It's like, well, isn't that wonderful? So yeah, I got robbed by the government. That's not relative to this video. Sorry about that. I still feel discombobulated because of that horrific experience, but that's where I've been for the past couple of days. I don't actually like to make videos about anything if there's like a gazillion other videos who are inexplicably bad about it, Yagi antennas, but they don't need to be complicated like that. They're making these beautiful golden ratio designs and vortexes and conicals, and the one that I was rolling my eyes over is pyramidal shape, and that's just a total waste of time making it beautiful or something it's just no, it's absolutely not necessary. This dude doesn't know the first thing about antennas. I have no connection to new age stuff or what I call new age woo-woo. Electroculture actually is real. And I'll actually point you back to videos that I made years and years ago talking about magnetic seed exposure. Over these many years of me discussing that, much of which was based upon Rawls and Davis's experimentation, South Pole exposure, seed. I've got countless videos on that. At first, when I was talking about that, people said, there's just no way this would work. I would have heard about this before. It's like, well, this is, Rawls and Davis have a book on this. I said, I've done the experiment endless numbers of time, and since those many years have passed where I was attacked over that,
normal,
so to say, many thousands of you have actually done that experiment. Say, hey, this guy is right, it absolutely does work. The same thing happened when I first started talking about field theory. I would mention dielectricity, and all sorts of people say, well, what the heck is dielectricity? There's no such thing as dielectricity. The greatest minds of field theory vis-a-vis Tesla, Faraday, Steinmetz, and others talked endlessly, the great gods of field theory on this earth. It's not like some sort of imaginary word that I came up with. Also, too, talking about gold extraction, because gold is not ferromagnetic, but everything is magnetoreactive. It actually slowed down baby powder gold in the sluice run by taking advantage of the diamagnetic properties of gold to decelerate out the fine gold such that people would catch it instead of it running out of the sluice
Actually, it's
fund.
not the diamagnetic
Hyperlogical, it
properties.
absolutely
It's
does
the
work. And I
electrical
talk about
conductor properties that it's used. But anyways, yeah, there's those use eddy
orientation, so-
currents to create eddy current drag and current flow. It's not using the diamagnetic properties of gold, so wrong. But go on, yeah.
I'm not interested in any sort of woo-woo stuff, so I had to say that because electroculture superficially does sound like woo-woo or new age, you know, sort of stuff. And if you watch some of the YouTube videos versus outside, you're not going to take advantage of structured water unless you have some sort of system set up, and it's not appropriate for conventional farming where you're relying on Mother Nature, of course, to drop out rain on your plants and your veggies and your fruits and whatnot. The other one is dielectric induction. Dielectric induction, i.e. what people are calling electroculture, is actually hyperlogical. But when you superficially look at the YouTube videos, you see all these people making, you know, vortex shapes out of copper wire, and, you know, you roll your eyes just as I would, but there actually is a genuine science, empirical, demonstrable value behind it. And for example, on the seed experiments, water is a polar molecule, fact. Magnet is a polar object. I mean, I can literally say I wrote the book on magnetism, and it is demonstrable. Thousands of people have done that experiment with seed experimentation, or also two other germinating for more dramatic effects. So this is not new age fluffery at all. Electroculture actually does work, but it doesn't require any of the elaborate things that those people are doing. You only need a simplex Yagi array, and they need to be grounded into the root system. I don't know if you know what a TENS unit is. Like one guy, for example, is a Hollywood guy, Jeremy Renner. He's a snowplow, not a snowmobile. A snowplow like flipped over on him. He like broke 20 bones or something, and, you know, he hasn't moved for months. I mean, he has recently. But, you know, to get the leg muscles going, they put these TENS unit pads on his leg to actually pulse your muscles. Bruce Lee did that. He said he would get a workout just sitting there on his bed or his couch. You plug in the TENS unit and it actually stimulates your muscles. Now, a root system is not a muscle. It kind of is in a sort of way, but not literally. But I'm using an analogy to point out the fact that you actually ground these units for dielectric induction to the root system. Also, too, pointing at the plant itself, a Yagi array, and I'll actually talk about what is best. I'm not talking interested in pure theory, but what somebody can actually do, just as I pointed out, seed experimentation is no different than a TENS unit, except you're actually applying this to the plant and also to its root system. And it has to be grounded. There's only a few criteria here, and the criteria for that is that the best, by the way, is say you have a plot of land to be in your backyard, or a farm. A farm would be a lot more difficult because copper is expensive. It doesn't have to be copper. I have like a 2-meter Yagi antenna over here. I used to be a ham radio operator, and I've done an enormous amount of research, not only on building antennas, but also too on antenna theory. It's just a Yagi antenna array. You can actually build really simple ones like this with director, reflector, driver elements that are actually pointed at the sky, that are actually grounded evenly to the grid. So you have like a 8 by 12 rectangular garden in your backyard, nothing super huge. If you want to use copper, fine. You don't need to use copper. You use aluminum. It needs to be grounded. It needs to be spaced evenly in the garden that you have. They shouldn't all be grounded in the same spot. If you have an antenna system and you're trying to ground the antenna, for example, like on a radio array, you're only interested in grounding out so that you have really good SNR, signal to noise ratio. When you're actually grounding on a garden or a plant system, assume it's not one plant. Some of these people do it just 3 or 4 plants. You stick it in the middle of the 3 or 4 plants, for example, that's fine. But if you actually have a garden, they need to be evenly spaced. So the grounding needs to be in the root system, and it needs to be evenly spaced for the grounding to be effective so that it affects all plants to the best possible availability. The best would be a large square or circular Yagi array. Now, the Yagi array doesn't have to be like this. There's actually loop Yagi antennas that actually have maximum gain. So you're using very little copper because copper is expensive. So is aluminum wire, not really, depends on how big the garden is. But these people are actually making complex, my point being that all these electroculture things they're talking about on YouTube, even though they're getting drastic results, they're creating complex systems that don't need to be created for the implementation of electroculture. This doesn't have that much aluminum in it. This is a 2-meter Yagi. Look up what a Yagi antenna is and the elements of a Yagi. They don't actually have to be like this. You used to see this on top of people's antennas back in the day. They'd be for UHF, VHF, TV reception, but they can be loop Yagis. This is a reflector element. This is the driven element. You can actually see the coax here. Now, in the case of electroculture, you'd actually take RG58, which would be the cheapest. You don't need anything more than RG58. You're not trying to receive radio signals here. You're actually trying to create dielectric induction into the plant system. The RG58, you can actually see the coax.
To do that. Holy cow. Why would anybody use that kind of device to produce that? Wow.
It's obviously he doesn't know what he's doing. He also doesn't know what a logarithmic array antenna is, because that's what the TV antennas are. They look kind of like a Yagi, but they're not.
Aren't those directional?
Yes, they're absolutely directional.
Okay, so
yeah, this is kind of painful. I'm gonna be honest. It's kind
of it was getting painful. But let's get the breakdown here. So he doesn't really know what he's talking about. And so, what though about using these antennas to bring down, ground your charge, and what he claims with
you might as well stick a metal plate in the air. You're better off.
Okay.
Unless you want to feed your plants like TV signal or radio signal, you know. If that's what you're trying to do, then yeah, go right ahead. But...
And it might be that simple that all you need is a copper wire in the ground going up, 5-10 feet, and then it in the ground, because that will pull the electricity in. That sharp point on the end of the wire will pull in more charge into the ground in that area. Maybe that's all you really need.
Right, and I did think it was a fair part that he was talking about how you're having to space them out evenly in a actual plotted garden outside and not just around a few plants to get an even field going into it, and the main point that you're using an antenna array or in some sort of antenna to bring charge from the atmosphere down into the ground and grounding it for the plants into the roots. Yes, no, maybe so. Is that the general concept of it, or?
It's sort of a multi-layer thing. If you have electrical charges drifting down already, that's going to tell the plants which direction to grow. One of the great discoveries of electroculture was that after we understood that the Earth was an electric circuit and that there was a differential charge as you went up from the ground in the more and more positive direction because of the downwards ion drift that generates the general field. Even if there are no ions hitting you, you still have the electric field from all the ions that are above you and in the air and in the atmosphere. So that generates basically that electric charge field. It is from physical particles that have been ripped of their electrons from the solar bombardment. But anyways, yeah, the fact is that those things are trying to attract anything that conducts electricity to carry the electrons, which is mainly water. But even more so, it's also a lot of those small dissolved nutrients that are metallic in nature, which carry and can be easily ionized within the soil and carried up to help neutralize out the atmospheric ions. And one of the ways they'll do that to try and get up towards the sky where there's the greatest charge is they will try to flow through the plants, which are a structure which is conductive, allowing the conductivity of the water and the nutrients in it to reach towards the sky. And that actually helps take some weight off the plants. So a very large area plant, like a tree, for example, if you were to measure that thing, if say you were to take that same tree and completely uproot it and bring it inside of an enclosed steel building and weigh it, it would weigh a bit more than it does when it's sitting outside in nature and during the daytime, because during the daytime some of its weight is being supported by the fact that it has a negative ground charge that's going up through its trunk and into its leaves and into its branches and being pulled towards the positive ion charge above it. So that does help and assist the tree, and also helps move nutrients through the tree. And so you can synthesize this with like a flyback transformer from a TV or a little eBay high voltage circuit or whatever to create a high voltage above your plants in the positive direction, so that you are negatively grounded and you have a positive charge above, like a plate that you can stick there. Aluminum foil works, and so does a pie pan. Anything with basically rounded edges that's not going to spray ions works really well, and that charge will increase the upwards growth of the plant. If you wanted to grow wide, on the other hand, let's say that you had, like, say, cannabis plant, and you wanted to get really fat, you'd want to surround that cannabis plant by a large metal ring, almost like a metal cylinder with nothing on top, and that would cause it to try to grow out towards the positively charged ring. You just have to have it not sitting on the ground or connected to anything that it was going to short out. But yeah, the plant would grow towards wherever the positive charge plate is.
Cool. Well, now I've got up Matt Roresk. He has a channel called Cultivate Elevate, and he is specifically into electroculture and applying it and developing it and giving his results on. And we've got an interview with him on Autodidactic Alchemist exactly 1 week tomorrow, Friday the 24th, I believe. And this is a little 8-minute clip we'll play of his to see what he's been doing with electroculture.
And I'm like, you know what? I want to try this. Really simple. Here's the easiest thing. I went to Ace Hardware. I got some wooden dowels. I got copper wire. I wrapped it in a spiral, almost like the DNA or Kundalini, up up the wood. I put the wood in it, and I have a little antenna. So I created an antenna. That's it. It took my son and I, aside from by the time we got back from Ace Hardware. And by the way, it was fun because I got to tell the people at Ace Hardware, and they were like, "What are you doing? What is this?" They're taking notes and whatever. So that's how easy it was. Matt, why does it work?
So electroculture, and this is why I was saying, Dean, if you do have an area to grow, you could utilize electroculture to grow food, and then also bring your kids into it as well too. So they're also taking place into it as well, because when they're connected with the food, you'll also be connected with the food together at the same time. But basically what electroculture is basically harnessing the Earth's energy that's all around us, the ether, the orgone, the chi, the prana, everything that's all around us that we just can't see. What you're doing is you're taking a piece of wood with copper or brass, you can use either one, and you're taking that and you're putting it into the ground and you're creating an ether antenna. And that ether antenna is going to pick up the frequencies that are all around and help increase the magnetism and the sap, the blood of the plant, right? Because what happens is because of all this nonsense that we're being bombarded with and whatever else, it's messing up our soil. It's causing our soil to dry out faster. It's impacting us, our plants as a whole. And when you put this little antenna in there, the plants will now resonate because now you have an antenna right next to it, and copper will start to re-energize the soil. What happens is when we use iron tools, and this is something we were never taught about and it was suppressed from us, but when we use iron tools in the soil, they actually lead to drought-like conditions. It pulls the moisture out of the soil because it damages the magnetism of the soil, leading to droughts, leading to dust bowls, leading to all of those things. So they sold us iron tools back in the day while not selling us copper tools. Because when we use copper in the soil, we actually increase our yields, increase our plant growth, increase the ability to harness energy. And it was interesting because Victor Schauberger at the time, when he studied all of this,
All right, I'm going to switch it over to a couple of his short videos where he's actually showing himself growing
electroculture on indoor plants. And this is a 28-day difference, right? So right here we have a plant without electroculture. Right here we have a plant with electroculture. Now, what is electroculture? Electroculture is using copper to harness the atmospheric energy that's all around us. And this is a simple experiment right here that you can do for yourself to test electroculture and see what happens for you. But we have so many people where their gardens are pretty much going crazy, and this is just a perfect example of an indoor plant that has already doubled in size in 28 days. Now, the fascinating thing is that we're never taught about electroculture because a lot of the books suppress this information so that they can sell us pesticides, fertilizers, and chemicals, right? Who are the big factors in that? You have Monsanto, who wants to pretty much take over all of the food supply and patent nature. And then also, too, they want to sell us the poison so that we can eat the poison and then have a whole bunch of side effects and then sell you the solution shortly after. But in reality, we don't need any of that. We can just use electroculture to harness all this beautiful energy that's around us, the atmospheric energy, the ether, the chi, the prana, the orgone, and you can try this yourself. You look up our blog, it's called
piece of copper wire through the stem of a tomato plant. Will it help prevent disease and keep the plant healthy and producing for longer? G'day, I'm Mark from Self-Sufficient Me, and I experimented with this copper wire to find out if it really does work, or is it just another tomato growing myth? Let's get into it.
I didn't have good results when I tried.
We're coming to the end of our tomato season now, but I grow a lot of tomatoes. Some would say a ton of tomatoes. Over the years, I've heard many tips about how to grow tomatoes successfully, and this copper wire hack is one that routinely comes up. Basically, the concept is when the copper wire is pushed through the tomato stem, the copper reacts with the fluids moving past the wire, and this chemical reaction gets distributed around the plant, building up its immunity to fungal diseases. Tomato plants are prone to disease, especially leaf disease, and mainly caused by fungi. And if those diseases are not kept in check, This can reduce tomato harvest and productivity substantially. The most common ways to help prevent disease is to prune off problem leaves. This is in performance between those with the copper wire and those without, for growing vigour, signs of disease, fruit production, longevity, and overall health. And here are my conclusions. Growth, as I already stated, this wasn't affected, with all plants growing at similar rates, regardless of being stabbed through the stem with wire or not, and also fruit production was about the same. Disease, all plants suffered with disease, some coped than others, but this was likely due to variety rather than the copper wire or not. All tomato plants succumbed to disease faster and at least 6 weeks earlier than those tomato plants in other parts of our garden. So
this guy was an idiot and didn't do real electroculture at all. There's no antenna going in, and he stabbed all the plants, like piercing in, causing infection, and that's why they died, which is just ridiculous, having the wire running through it. So this is exactly what not to do.
Why would he stab it through there? That's like their veins. It's like shooting up.
Oxidization, maybe, but he didn't even use that word. That guy clearly does not know what he is talking about. Let's go back here to Matt Riosk. One more short clip. I believe this is also him showing some actual results of the electroculture process he's using.
About before and afters of electroculture. Does it work? Is it placebo? Is the copper doing anything? This is a before and after video showing the difference of Elisa's garden on TikTok. Her handle is gardening521, and you can look her up. But this is her garden before electroculture in 2020. She was just using compost and fertilizer, which is the traditional way, and it looked like she was yielding a ton of food in her backyard. We can all have abundance. That's the magic of just growing our own food. We don't have to be dependent on the toxic chemicals in which we try to supply us with. So let's look at the after. So this is the after of electroculture, implementing copper and wood antennas in the garden to amplify the Earth's energy, the magnetism, and the life force of the sap, the plant's blood. What's happening is she's increasing the magnetism and the Earth's energy in that area, creating a vortex so that the plants can grow larger, get bigger, and also receive more nutrients, right? When the plant is at its most optimal level, it will grow and just keep growing. We could probably grow plants almost 50 feet high, but the pesticide companies load their pesticides with tons of iron, which diminishes the life force of our planet and our foods so that we are dependent on the grocery store. If you want to learn more about electroculture, you could check out our blogs, Electroculture for Beginners, at Cultivate Elevate Electroculture in 2020. She was just using compost and fertilizer, which is the traditional way, and it looked like she was yielding a ton of food in her backyard. We can all have abundance. That's the magic of just growing our own food. We don't have to be dependent. It can grow larger, get bigger, and also receive more nutrients, right? When the plant is at its most optimal level, it will grow and just keep growing. We could probably grow plants almost 50 feet high, but the pesticide companies load their pesticides with tons of iron.
I'm missing what he's actually doing
the life force of our planet and our foods so that we are dependent.
We'll have to talk to him directly next Friday and see what he's actually saying. And, well, the key is to be doing our own experiments with it all. And that's what Gerald is doing, and that is what I'm going to be doing myself again. Just like last year where I got that 6-foot gold monoatomic gold lettuce. I'm going to be doing all the water experiments, the colloidal and the monoatomic water growth experiments, also trying the diatomic this year. And then I like this antenna idea, and the current of it. Jeremiah, do you want to give some more like direction of what you would suggest for a setup for like a urban electroculture garden?
I wouldn't want to give advice at this time because I'm just now getting into electroculture, and as of I would say the last 2 months is all I've really spent seriously looking into how to do it. I've known about it for a super long time, and I've done some experiments way back, but they were all indoor and controlled experiments. So as far as like a full-scale electrical culture for an outdoor garden or those kinds of things, I'm just now becoming quite well read on it, and so I will have advice in the future. But what I can say for now and for sure is some simple experiments to do is have a high voltage DC power supply and some kind of metallic plate that you can suspend above and connect that to the high voltage positive output of like a flyback transformer from a TV. It's the cheapest, easiest kind of high voltage supply that you're probably going to get. And you can build circuits that operate that thing at fairly low current, so you can run it off a wall adapter at like 3 or 4 watts.
How high voltage?
I recommend, like, it depends on the distance of the plate, but generally something like 3,000 or 4,000 volts, you will absolutely see a difference. If you really wanted to like push the boundaries for an indoor experiment or something like that, you might want to use 25,000 volts at about half a meter. And
what's a microwave?
What's that?
What's a microwave transformer put off?
Roughly about 1,800 to 2,500 volts, but you don't want to use one of those because they're incredibly inefficient. You would actually want to use some small DC flyback transformer or something with a little voltage multiplier in it. And you're just trying to simulate basically something significantly higher than that 100 volts per meter, because the actual voltage experienced by the leaves as the ions come from the top down and get close to them is significantly higher in terms of volts per meter if you look at the electric potential. So you need to simulate that kind of field or have a positive ion generator, which unfortunately you can't buy a positive ion generator. They're all negative ion generators online. So you have to build your own voltage multiplier, but it's again not very difficult to do.
Could you use a transformer from like an air ionizer or something like that, or a power supply from it?
If you happen to have an air ionizer and you want to destroy such a beautiful piece of equipment,
you can get them cheap from China. I mean,
can you?
Yeah, banggood.com.
Oh, are you just talking about those generic like 12 volt air ionizers? Yeah, all those are negative output. They're all negative output. If you can find one that's positive, that would be fantastic. But I've taken a look around, and last time I looked, every single one was a negative ion generator.
Are you able to reverse it though?
Nope, you can't.
You flip the
reverse it.
diodes
Flip the
around.
wires, you just blow it up. Yeah, it's the whole voltage multiplier that's internally potted. It has to be, the diodes have to face a certain direction, and they're not.
I was thinking like hook something like that up to a rodent coil, maybe.
Well, ionizers and high voltage DC and magnetic fields are really quite tangential sides of the same equation, but you can't really pump a very high voltage DC through a low impedance resistive thing like copper coil. It really is about the electric fields in the air. So you've got your two halves. You have your magnetic fluxes and you have your electric fields. This is a case where I'm talking about purely the electric fields, and that's because they are what plants outside in nature, exposed to the atmosphere, are experiencing. Primarily, they are given direction to grow based on the electric field. And so you can synthesize and increase transport of plant cells and nutrient exchange by using magnetic fields, and that will help create a healthier, stronger, more robust plant. But if you want to control the direction of growth of the plant, it's very difficult to do magnetically. So that's where you want to use this electric field electroculture. If you wanted to, if you had four plates and something that grew up in a fairly straight stem type of configuration, and you say 4 plates right, north, south, east, west, and you just simply turned each plate on for like 1 day or 2 days at a time, then you switch to the next one, walking around the clock, you could make that plant grow in a spiral.
I have a bunch of copper plates like that size. But that's probably not useful in that small size.
It's perfectly useful, but if you want to be cheap about it, and I would recommend being cheap about it, just take a piece of cardboard and spray adhesive, some aluminum foil to it, or tape it around and use that as your electrode.
That's pretty much what I use as my reflectors anyway for the light, to get the bottom of the leaves illuminated and whatnot. Anyway, so yeah, I already got something like that I could just hook electrodes up to.
Right, yeah, they have 4 plates, one in each corner around it. 100.
I didn't think about that.
But yeah, complicated, really. These are simple experiments.
Yeah, exactly. So starting with the experiments, and I have to rebuke my insults earlier to the Australian fellow that tried the copper. He's not an idiot. He was he was an experimenter and tried it out, and that specific method did not work, and good on him for trying it. So now everybody knows not to do that and to try.
See, this is what happens when you listen to Ken Wheeler, man. When you listen to Ken Wheeler, just your standards for humanity kind of go down enough, and then now everybody's an idiot because you just
Hey,
your bullshit filters were still on way too high because you had to filter through that
there's
thing.
no idiots here. As long as you're experimenting, trying to figure things out, and publishing knowledge and discourse, what better can you do? And thank you, Blind Spot, for the $9.99 $10 donation super chat. It is greatly appreciated. And that reminds me, thank God the YouTube gods have finally shone in my favor, and Crypto Alchemist, my larger channel, was approved for monetization finally today. And thank you for being the second ever super chat, Blind Spot. It is greatly appreciated. And we are at the 2-hour mark, and it
Quick
is
question, Bernie.
Yes, sir.
What were those? What was the two M-state metals that I was asking about earlier? You said for me to bring up. I am blanking because it's been so long. I think I have it on paper actually. 1 second.
I'll pull that up, and I think Jeremiah would be the one to ask that.
So I've got something. Well, you're
looking at
iridium
that,
and
iridium and rhodium
and platinum. I was told those are ingredients of mana as well as what Bernie uses.
What do I use now?
What you were talking about on the show that you played earlier. The Ormus.
Yeah, the monoatomics, the Ormus.
Like this. So I was told it was silver, gold, platinum, rhodium, iridium, and something else. I forget. I didn't write that one down because I learned it since, but I just never heard anyone mention iridium and rhodium before. But I got it from a book that I read about 10 years ago. I don't recall which.
I'd try those metals, the higher up ones. They might, breaking down, cause extra decay and potential radioactive isotopes on parts of it.
Well, they were
silver, gold, zinc, and copper, like the soft noble metals.
Yeah, zinc. I forgot that one. That's the one I was trying to remember.
The denser, the bigger the metal going up, the heavier the atomic mass, the more potential breakdown particles you have coming out of it.
The guy had just claimed he had got it from an ancient text. I think it was it might have been Egyptian. I'm not positive. It's been so long since I read it, and I only wrote down part of the notes because I didn't know what was important at the time.
Fair.
Yeah.
Start with gold, silver, copper, and zinc, especially zinc when making colloidal waters and monoatomics for sure. Any other questions before we call her a night? I think Andreas might have fallen asleep with us. Do we have another sleeping streamer? Zerdis?
I've got one more idea about the worn out farms and the soil. There's a book called The Farm That Won't Wear Out. It was written over 100 years ago. Amazon sells it. It's on archive.org for free. And it goes through and shows you how to make sure you do not wear out your soil. It is a fantastic book. It's not very long. It's extremely well done. The Farm That Won't Wear Out.
Nice. I like the sounds of that, right? And it's almost a lost art, and it's ridiculous how much they make us poison our crops now with these different pesticides and supposed fertilizers that oftentimes create bigger imbalance, toxin, and pollutants within our agriculture and food chains.
Doesn't Asia use Pepsi to get rid of bugs?
Who and what?
Doesn't Asia use Pepsi to get rid of bugs, like China or Japan or something like that?
No idea what you're talking
China
about.
does weird
use it as a pesticide.
I know people use beer for slugs.
Right?
Oh,
yeah.
slugs love beer. They go right into
Cola's
the dish of beer
pretty
and drown themselves.
let's not get us all a lawsuit, but some cola companies are very acidic, so maybe it could kill. I don't know.
I've used
can
cola
use it on your
in
toilet.
my
That
toilet
way.
before. I would recommend. Not to drink though. Don't drink that stuff.
Yeah, Dr. Pepper, instant kidney stone for me.
And on that note, adieu. Oh. There we go.